This is Perfect English Practice Podcast. Unlock your potential with episodes designed to boost your English fluency through practical advice, real-world conversations, and cultural understanding. Whether it's improving grammar, expanding vocabulary, or perfecting pronunciation, we've got you covered every step of the way. Hit subscribe and start your journey toward mastering English one step, one episode, one success at a time.
I'm Aisha Roscoe, and this is the Sunday Story from Up First, where we go beyond the news of the day to bring you one big story. Many of us decide to make changes in our life all the time. Sometimes they're small, like New Year's resolutions to read more or eat less sugary sweets. But sometimes we make big changes, ones that are life-altering, like a career change. Today, we're going to focus on those life-altering changes, specifically the ones we make late in life. One of the most notable people to make a big change in recent years is President Donald Trump, who will tomorrow be inaugurated as president for the second time. He famously turned from mogul to politician when he was 69, an age often considered retirement age. But growing numbers of people are rejecting this idea that a productive life ends at a certain age. Instead, many are now seeing the part of life that comes after middle age not as an end, but as a beginning. The start of what some call the third act of life. Anthony Brooks is a former NPR reporter and longtime correspondent at member station WBUR in Boston. He's spent the last few years interviewing people about their decision to reimagine and reinvent themselves late in life. His series is called Third Act, and he joins us now to talk about what he's learned. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Aisha. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So I'm intrigued by the origin story of this project. Did you decide to do this because you were feeling stuck or you wanted a change in your life?
I think there's always a bit of that going on with me, but I think where this really started for me was about 16 years ago. I had a bit of a health scare, which thankfully I recovered from. I was also mourning the loss of my dad, and I guess you could say that I was coming to terms with this idea that there's a lot more of my life behind me than ahead of me, and I'm thinking for the first time, what do I really want to do with the time that remains? And I became intrigued with stories of people who found ways to reinvent themselves late in life in interesting and inspirational ways. And just when I was dialing into this idea, Catherine Seeley of the New York Times reported a great story about a man who began this third act journey in a really fascinating way. And that story really helped launch this project.
Okay, so tell me about the man in that story that drew your attention.
Yeah, so his name is Tom Andrew, and he worked a full career as a doctor, including 20 years as the chief medical examiner for New Hampshire, which is where I live. Tom saw it all up close, Aisha. You know, the grim toll of car accidents, of gunshot wounds, poisonings, assaults, and suicides. You name it, he saw it. He said it was a job that gave him a particular appreciation for the fragility of life, and he remained committed to his work until the opioid crisis hit New Hampshire hard. And he told me that he watched too many kids, too many young people die, and that he didn't feel that the state was taking the epidemic seriously enough.
And I tried to raise the alarms about this, that at this rate, we will see more drug deaths in a given year in New Hampshire than traffic deaths. Well, sure enough, it came to pass.
What was the actual number? If it started out at like 50 a year?
There were 500 drug deaths a year. There was this frustration with some folks who were perfectly content not to do anything. We live free or die here. I could not reconcile that with what I was seeing and what I was feeling.
And eventually, Tom just had enough. And in 2017, at the age of 61, he quit. He'd done the job for 20 years, so he retired.
But I'm guessing since we're talking about him, he didn't just stop and retire in a traditional sense.
No, not at all. You know, he could have followed that route. He could have retired, put his feet up, cruised into old age. But instead, he goes back to school. He's a man of faith, so he goes to seminary school to become a Methodist deacon because what he wants to do is work with his local Boy Scout troop. So here's a bit of what he told me about that.
I spent 20 years on the assessment end, counting the cost. When I wanted to make my change, I wanted to work with young people and let them see that there's a better way than that pill or that powder or that joint that's offered to them by their erstwhile friend.
So he wanted to do good, and he wanted to do it at a point when it would matter.
Yeah, he really, and this animates a lot of the stories that I found. He wanted to give back is really a good way to put it. And it's worth pointing out that becoming a full-fledged deacon is a long process. It involves not only seminary school, but studying and sitting for interviews with church elders. And Tom was still at it just a couple of years ago at the age of 66 when I was talking to him.
Well, how is it going for Tom now? Like, is he happy with the life that he chose and the radical change that he made?
You know, he really is, as far as I can tell. His kids are grown. He's still happily married. And perhaps most importantly, his life has new purpose, Aisha. And he seems to be really thriving in this third act.
So, Anthony, this is a really heartwarming story. And as you say, what Tom did, I guess is no longer as out there or outlandish as it might have seemed. What has changed? Is it that people are just living longer?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, but that's one of the main things worth considering. If you go back just over 100 years to 1900, the average life expectancy was around 47. Today, it hovers near 80. So that means we're living 3 decades longer than we used to. You know, I spoke to a bunch of experts on this subject, and one of them put it this way, that if you're 54, you could be only halfway through adulthood. And by the way, I came across this fact, which sort of blew my mind, Aisha. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of Americans living into their 90s by 2050 could be as much as 10 times higher than it was in 1980. So that means if you're one of those people and you're 45, you're only halfway through your life. So you've got half your life ahead of you. So when you hit that traditional retirement age, there's still a lot of life left to live. That's the main point here.
Okay, I'm not 45 yet, but I certainly hope when I'm 45 that I got half of my life ahead of me. I hope I got a long,
You got a good
time.
chance, Aisha. You got a good chance.
But that is wild to think about, like how much longer people are living these days and what that means.
Yeah, it is crazy. And consider that some 80 million people in the United States are over the age of 60, and there are more and more of them every day. In fact, as many as 10,000 people a day are turning 65. So we're living longer, and there are a whole lot more of us thinking about sort of what do we do with this extra 2 or 3 decades of life? And those who study this period have given it a name. It's called middlescence. Think of it as a later in life adolescence. It's a time of change, of tumult, but it can also be a time of opportunity and growth like adolescence. And by the way, Aisha, old age or older age offers an opportunity to be even happier than you might have been. And there's research on this, the so-called U-shaped theory of happiness. That suggests that happiness declines for many people from the teens or early 20s into the 40s and 50s, but then rises again when people hit their 60s, 70s, even their 80s. So this can be a really great time to reimagine your life.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.